Hey guys, what's up? So on this video, this is going to parallel with the general introduction to playing, but this is going to be from the mission editor side. So it's going to be two parts. I'm going to go as quickly as I can without being um, too general. But it's probably going to take a few videos to really get through all the details. That said, it's not really that complicated. So what I'm going to show you is what is initially called the Boneyard, and this is available on the forum from the download link. And this is just a collection of all the items that you use to build a mission with this system. And most of these items are actually independent, and by that I mean that they can be used without the other components. So like if there's just like one little part or one little piece of this that you find interesting, you can actually grab that, and you probably don't need the other ones. A few of them are kind of really tied to the other components, but they, I think you get the idea. There's elements you can take out if you wish to, but everything kind of works together to build a I don't know a kind of a moment in time. That's the idea. So I'm just going to show you how each of the different components fits together and what it does in general in this video. And then we're going to talk about details and build a mission from this. Like it's going to go directly from what I show you here. It's going to be the same. It's literally called example 01. It's got a really, really creative name. So I thought about it for a while, that name. I'm kind of not kidding. So, uh, so this is what happens when you import it. Like you downloaded it, they're all going to be versioned. That's why you see all these versions here. Use the newest one. Seriously, it's the coolest. So they will all follow the same general concepts. And if you happen to watch the general introduction to playing, you saw some of that. So I'm just going to show you what each of these things are, its general interface, and a couple little details about it. And then the next one will use that information to build a pretty simple, but that said, of highly variant, very dynamic, and reactive, like truly reactive mission where you really have control over what's going on, despite the fact that it is different every time you play it. So when you import this boneyard, you pull it in, you see this. And I'm highlighting this so you can see the boxes a little bit easier. The left side is all the German units. The right side is the Russian units, and they're effectively congruent. Excuse me, I drink some water. I said water, but it's actually beer. This beer makes you strong. So this little centerpiece, this kind of controls the entire battle, and this is actually the one unit that is probably going to change the most. Only visibly, though. The way that the icons look is kind of unclear. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, but I'll come up with something to make it more clear. But that's the largest piece. Kind of everything falls beneath it. Like it represents the entirety of the battle and how well overall everybody is doing. Um, I guess I will briefly speak from the highest level to the lowest, but then we'll go into detail on the lowest. So the battle really is the highest level. If I go inside this group just a bit, and I was hacking on it so it's a little bit opened up, it will really look like this when you open it. Um, it might look like the other way when you open it, but whatever. It's the same either way. This guy really kind of controls. This is a gauge right here on the bottom, and everything moving to the left. And as the gauge moves left, it means the Germans are winning. And as the gauge moves right, it means the Russians are winning. And all kinds of the other stuff is what controls whether or not you're moving one direction or the other. And those steps, there's kind of two steps to the left and two steps to the right, are significant. Like big things have to occur for them to move in any direction. Um, and everything kind of lives beneath it. And the things that live beneath it directly are armies. So this is the Russian army and this is the German army. And if I go inside it, I'm just going to go very quickly again. This one is opened up too, but it kind of should look like that. Basically, what you're looking at is this is a little display. Right now, I just have it being three icons. It's 3 by 4. And I'm just going to briefly touch on why that's by 4. The 4 variations are kind of the health. So this is like represents the health of the army. Essentially, if we look at these icons, you'll see that they're just lines. 1 line, 2 line, 3 line, 4 line. Only one of those lines is active at a time. If the top line is active, it's going to be blue, and it means you're doing the most healthy. The next level is green, then the next level lower is orange, and then the lowest level is red, and that means you're kind of in trouble. So if I go back in here to the Russian army, And the system controls this stuff. I mean, you have some bearing on it, but like, don't worry about it. That's the man behind the curtain and all that shit. So, um, here is kind of the main controller for the army. We're not going to talk about it too much, but essentially all the things that I build, with very few exceptions to this rule, the buttons on the left, it'll be a block of objects that's a controller probably, then some other crap that is getting controlled, and a set of timers on the left that are inputs. You would normally hit these with something, you would trigger them somehow, and a set of timers on the right that are outputs that events that occur within this thing cause its output. And to show you the outputs in this one, we're not going to go into the details yet. It's just success, failure, and hey, I shut down. The inputs are activate, show to enemy. That's for icons. It's for reconnaissance. We'll talk about that later. Run tells it to run. Shut down tells it to shut down. Move up and move down, which means like improve. Like something on the outside happened that was good for this army, and so it improves. Or something on the outside happened that was bad for this army, and it de-improves. And what improving and de-improving mean is actually highly variant. So we're totally not going to those details. The army, just as the battle contains armies, now as we go down, we're going to stay on the same side. So a battle can hold Russian armies and German armies, but this army unit over here, say that this was the Russian 62nd Army, is only going to contain Russian units, doi, and all that. So armies contain divisions, and these are divisions here. You'll notice that these are kind of organized so they're easy to see. It's division, army, division, units, and then these two are special. We'll talk about them later. But the names over here are same too, and I try very hard to keep everything really organized. I find that actually a bit strange because I literally have nothing else in my life quite so organized. Anywho, armies contain divisions. Divisions have some components to them. I should have briefly talked about what armies have. Armies also have an air base and an actual like physical base. Um, Divisions are kind of like an actual set of units that's moving, but divisions can control one of a set of different possible units. So one single division may at some moment in a single mission have tanks out, and in another moment in a single mission have columned trucks out, or have airplanes out, or have just a different set of tanks, or just the same type of tanks going in a different direction, or a different route. Um, Divisions also have a supply line, they have a small base, and they have a concept of health that works the same way, the blue, the green, the orange, and the red. And what health level they're at determines which units they're showing. So if they can have anywhere between one variety of unit to four varieties of unit. So it can be such that for all four levels of health, they have the same unit out. Or it can be such that for each individual four levels of health, they have a unit out. So you can have, yeah, you get the idea. There's components in this that I think that are interesting maybe to some people. A lot of this is built with functional programming concepts, and these are essentially kind of like continuations and kind of like a reader monad all combined. So like there's outside state that can be read, but essentially everything is communicated to in a functional way. They have a direct input, they have a direct output, and this motherfucker doesn't touch anything except what is inside it. You know, like nothing outside it except via these outputs, making these things really close to true functions. So like, well, that's it's just another topic. So divisions, which are contained by armies, which are contained by battles, are in turn capable of containing something else, and divisions contain units. And before we talk about how divisions contain units, and how armies contain divisions, we're going to talk about these units. So these are kind of the defaults, and these are set up to be pretty generic, but easily modifiable into things that are very specific. They're also set up, unlike everything else in this boneyard, to be a little bit outside of band of how it actually operates inside the full system. But that's to make it easy. So, like, honestly, forget everything I just said. That was a little too complicated. These are just the units. These are the things that move and do stuff. You have a railroad. You have a column. Column is basically units that move like a column, but primarily not on the road. They can most certainly go on the road, and you can tell them to always be on the road. But the division that we were looking at just a moment ago actually has a unit inside it that is truly a column that goes on the road, and like it only goes on the road, and those are the supply lines. Um, How these units work and crap we're going to talk about a little later, maybe on this video. So the column, as I said, moves like that, and it can go on a road, but like generally it doesn't. You then have abreast units, and so these are generally tanks or something like that. They move abreast. You then have three units that are really the same except have different numbers. So like these tank units have two columns of 7 tanks, and the column units have two columns of 7 columns. I think that even though that didn't make sense, everybody got me. So like this will always have 14 units rolling. This will always have 14 units rolling. The train is just one train. I might change that. In fact, I want to change the train a lot, but whatever. It's one train and it functions. These are all air flights, and they all behave like AI flights. They are modifiable, so they can you can put fighters in there and they'll be fighters. You can put like Sturmoviks in there and they'll be ground attackers. You can put HE-111s or P-2s and have them way up high, and they can be level bombers or carpet bombers. So there's little settings that you can make in there. But the only difference between these three is that this is a flight of 3, and this is a flight of 5, and this is a flight of 7. Much like other functional programming difficulties, this is where you hit certain things, as certain things have to be explicit. So like if you were doing this in a purely functional world, this would be like the tuple. Like you actually have to say I have a 1 tuple or a 2 tuple or a 3 tuple. You can't just say a some number tuple. It suddenly makes it a list. So what these guys can do, and this is how we're going to be in a little bit of details. And we'll start with the tank type units, the abreast. So these guys move abreast. They move somewhat in tandem. So like there's two sets, one set up here, one set down here. You can just move their waypoints around to change their formation, to change their style, to make them move specific directions. Excuse me. The when when they start to get to the end here, they actually wait for their friendly units, all of them to show up, all that are remaining alive. It understands whether or not they've died. So like if they die, they don't wait for them. But as soon as all the ones that are still alive make it to the end, then it begins a barrage. And oftentimes these two groups you'll move together. Here, we'll move on in here. You'll move together and they'll end up bombarding an area that's very close because they wait for each other. But sometimes you'll have them be separate. However you do it is however you do it. But those details we're going to go into in the next one, like how you actually set up the units. Here we're just going to talk about how you can control the unit. So these units get embedded inside those divisions. How we do that, I think I'll show next video because I want to keep these around 15 and we're at 12 already. But you control these just like the other things with inputs and outputs. So you can activate it. You can show it to the enemy. We'll talk about that in just a second. You can make it run, and it will output success or failure. Now that little bit that I was talking about, how these are kind of different, is that they have this button right here. Anytime it succeeds or fails, when these guys succeed or fail, they are one continuous action. They're atomic. When you hit activate, they run, and nothing can stop them from running until they finish. They either fail or succeed. But when they fail or succeed, they are already out of the mission. So like all the units have either made it back to base or have died and have been deleted from the mission before failure or success can happen. What that allows you to do is chain these guys together based on success or failure, or kinds of any other conditions you want really, to produce effectual change in the battle. That's the fundamental concept behind this. It's not complicated at all. It's just like, hey, when I stop, something else go, and how I stopped, something else go. But making it be an atomic unit, in other words, there is nothing that affects it after you hit. It's like a real function. There's nothing that affects it after you hit activate until it's done and it returns a value. Um, Allows you to combine these things in interesting ways from one perspective and in very performance beneficial ways from other perspectives. Um, I can really run a huge number of units. Airplanes still crush this, but like I can run a huge number of ground units. I mean, the mission that's running right now is I think maybe a 70-kilometer front. Um, it has. I honestly can't even do the math for it. Like a few hundred ground units currently active, and it's running smooth, smooth, smooth. So like that's just another benefit you get from kind of this crap. So these guys, I'm going to talk very briefly about how these go into the divisions and then how the divisions go into the armies, just so we can kind of wrap this up. So I'm just going to do it so you see it. Let's say I was grabbing this abreast unit. This is the controller. These are the actual moving dudes. And I went into the division R. And let's say that I wanted this division, if I mentioned it had 4 levels, I want it to run these tanks at level 1 and 2, and these tanks at level 2 and 3. So these tanks at level blue and green, these tanks at level orange and red. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into orange and red, and I'm going to make these tanks. By the way, this bit I'm going over right now, I'm going to go over again in the next video because we're going to touch this with like great detail. Since this is orange and red, I want them to be defensive and way tough. So KV1s, like KV1s, man, KV1s are brutal. They are hard to destroy. So I'm not going to totally tell you what's going on here, but these are icons that draw an arrow. And there's 2 sets because one is for the Germans to see and one is for the Russians to see. Since these are Russians, the friendly side can always see the friendly side, but the enemy side cannot see where these Russians are until they do reconnaissance. And we'll talk about what that is, like, not now. So I always want these to say, like, all these arrow bits have no words on them, so it's just a line with arrows. But I like the first ones to be what the type of units are. That means the map, and if you didn't see the other video, the map always shows what units are currently active on your side, and just where generally where they are, because you kind of move this little icon set to be like where these guys are generally going. So I set those to be KV1s. That's done. Like they're now KV1s and will work as it inside the division. And then the next thing that I need to do is so I have these guys which are T70s. They're running on 1 and 2. That's blue and green. And these guys that are KV1s that are running when the unit is weaker, they're going to be defensive. But I don't really want to set up like how they line up yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the controller units up here. We're going to talk about why in a second. That's the supply line in the base, and these are the 2 sets of tanks. The KV1s running when it's weaker, and the T70s running when it's stronger. And I'm just putting them together. And then right here you would name your division. So like maybe this is the 192nd Tank Killer Shred Metal Division. It's certainly what the name of it was. Very historic. So one thing I do immediately is I get rid of these restarters. These are the dudes that whenever this stops, it goes away. But whenever it stops, it gets restarted. And I do that just so that you can take those units from the units in the Boneyard and just use them immediately, and they'll run forever for you. Like, they'll try their mission, and they succeed or fail no matter what, they'll try again. They're a little, like, Tommy the Train Engine or whatever the hell that crap is. So, when I was showing you the division earlier, I said these are the main inputs, these are the main outputs, this is the main controller. But there's also, if I pull these out, those are from our units. There was also these, and I didn't talk about those. Those are the internal hookup. That's how you hook units into the system. So there's a system in here that thinks, and it wants units, but it doesn't know which units you're going to give it because you got to copy and paste them in. And so what we're doing is we're giving it 2 units, and it sends out into here and reads in from here. So this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those do represent the levels that this is at. The blue, the green, the orange, and the red, doing the best to doing the worst. It also has show to enemy. That's the way for reconnaissance to work. We're leaving that to go. And run, which just says like something externally tells this unit to run away. So what we do is we go for 1 and 2, we activate the T70s. For 3 and 4, we activate the KV1s. Show to enemy. Oops, I'm sorry. I just hit the wrong one. Show to enemy hits both show to enemies because these 2 buttons really only mean anything when the current unit is active, and only one of these units can ever be active at a time. We'll talk a little bit more about that next time. But this is a zipper. This is a one-hole context that also goes with a functional shit for those that care. If either of these guys succeed, we hit any success because this is any success. Any of them succeed. If either of these guys fail, we hit any fail. And the reason for any success and any fail is that's how it controls whether it knows to get better or get worse. Anytime that there's a failure, it gets worse. And anytime there's a success, it gets better. So like if you're at 2 and this thing's running, these are the T70s, and the T70s fail, it's going to hit here, and just a moment later it's going to hit 3, and see how where that hits? It's going to start at the KV1s. And the KV1s are going to go do the battle. And you could put up to 4 different units in here for each of the levels. You can also just use 1. It also wants a pure success and a pure failure, and this means the entire division succeeds. and I make the 1 and 2 units work for that, or the entire division fails. Now, as you see, when you're using two, you kind of get an interesting component here. If you wire it up this way, it means you can get a lot of failures and you can get a lot of wins because you get a win at two and a win at one. And and like this is just how depending on how you want to wire it. You can, on the other hand, and I'm showing you this way on purpose, you can, on the other hand, say, well, whenever you actually just get to one, give me a success. Whenever you get to four, give me a fail. You can set up a thing where it's every two. It's however you want to do it. It's really just like whether or not, basically, do you want that unit to have it be very easy to succeed or very difficult to succeed? And that should depend on what that unit is doing. If it's like rolling in there and trying to take out a bunch of artillery, man, that's probably hard to succeed. Like, just depends on what you want to set. So once these guys are wired, and they are already, you can group all this up if you want to, just to make it clean. And we could call this our, whatever it was we called it. It was funny. We'll copy and paste it. 196. Oh my god, we're still gonna call that 192nd 10 killer shred metal. And what we have here now is a division. In a full division, this unit, once you hit activate, will start moving and not stop you moving and continuously try to do better and worse. And when it's doing better, it's going to have the T70s out, and when it's doing worse, it's going to have the KV1s out. We could complicate it. We could give it 2 more levels if we wanted. But for now, we're just going to grab it, copy it, and we're going to put it inside our army. But we're going to put it inside our army twice. And the reason we're going to do that, I'm hitting the end of my time. But that's okay, we're right at the end. The reason we're going to do it twice is because the army, unlike the division, like I said, the division contains units, but only has one unit of all its collected ones, all the ones inside it. It only has one unit active at a time. An army holds divisions, not units, and has all of them active at a time. But it hooks things up exactly the same way. So just like we had the 2 sets of tanks and I had them be slightly different inside that division, we're going to get 2 different divisions inside this army. So like if we would imagine this is the 62nd Army as we were saying before, it might have the 192nd Army our division inside it and the 40th Tank Division inside it. And these guys hook up, if you can see it the same way, it has this internal setup. These are different meanings. There's an activate, and you hit both of them. We're going to show this in more detail in the next one, so I'm just kind of brushing by them. Run, shut down, up, and down. And the outs go here, and part of the reason that we're passing on this is like all successes are generally success at this level because these two are running at the same time. Unlike the division where it would go from like when I'm doing great, this guy's active, and when I'm doing bad, this guy's active. They're both continuously active, and they're both affecting the state of the entirety of the army. And that makes sense because like you have an army that covers a front that has multiple active units at once. They're generally like active battalions or active divisions. And that's why I use these terms. I mean, they're like military terms, but they're very loosely tied to it. But they do fit that general concept. Like the units are similar to battalions. They're like units behaving in similar ways. And then the divisions are similar to divisions that they contain battalions, but have some like logistics in place. They have supply lines, they have a little base. You can add some other things to it too if you want to. Armies include the divisions, so like they spread out across a front line. But they have additional components too. They also have 4 levels. They have a much more complex base that has like actual meaningful building targets as well as artillery and crap. And they also have an air base that's multiplayer that the airplanes that are available at that depend on how well the army is doing. Um, and there's some specialty flights in there, and then all of these armies feed in, and what's happening with the army feed in to the battle, and what's happening in the battle, and how well overall you're doing. There are 2 more types of units that we're totally going to abandon on this discussion, but talk about on the next one at great length, that are for multiplayer airplanes. So, and they have specific purposes here, but the 2 of them can kind of branch out to various different uses. One is reconnaissance, and the other is wounded. So what reconnaissance really is it's a set of waypoints that ends in a land for a multiplayer flight. And so if that multiplayer flight is called recon and you have this whole setup that watches where it can fly, um, also called recon, then it can ensure that the plane flown by a human player flies a set of waypoints within a set amount of time and then comes back and lands safely. And then when it does that, good things happen. So if it is reconnaissance like this, it shows the whole other, and you make the whole reconnaissance flight through, you actually learn the position and type of all the enemy units. You see it on the map. That doesn't last forever. It lasts as long as they're still there and still valid. Those units are changing continuously based on events. So like you have to continuously do reconnaissance if you want to keep up to date information. Wounded can convert. Reconnaissance can convert to other things too. It can convert to like level bombing, whatever. Wounded can convert to things like what Wounded is it randomly gives you an airbase that you have to fly out and land at. So it also easily converts into supply lines and other things like that. Um, it has a couple nice features in that like if you successfully land, some trucks come out and like so like like you could have some like picked up wounded. Additionally, the airbase that you're supposed to land at, as soon as you're supposed to land at it, it has a whole bunch of defenses, so it's like hard for enemy units to just kind of poach you. And that's all the parts. You shove them together and you make big, complex, very historic battles. And we're going to start talking about that in the next video. The next video is just going to show a quick, totally ahistoric, right here on Lupino, simple battle with quite a few airplanes. But the mission running currently on the server is very historic. Uh, it's like a real battle. Check it out.